Good morning. Thank you for joining us. I'm Evelyn Gonzalez, and we also have Heather MacArthur. If you follow us on social media or even receive our newsletters, you've probably noticed that this month we've focused on career development, and we thought it would be a perfect time to talk about Heather's book, Your Career on Purpose, and her online On Purpose learning program. So, Heather, I read your book a few years ago when it first was released, and then recently listened to the audio version. And I have to say, both times found it super insightful. What I love most about it is that it is applicable, it's helpful, it's insightful for anyone, whether it's that teenager who's transitioning into the fast food industry to the vet who is transitioning from the military into the civilian workforce. I think we could spend hours on it. Unfortunately, we only have half an hour. But there's some things that come to mind as I was reviewing it again, listening to it. And you do such a great job of making us think as readers, even if we know what our purpose is in our careers. You talk about three mindsets:
Mm.
safety, uh, looking good, and that strategic, helpful mindset. You talk about kind of working that self awareness muscle.
Yeah,
Why is it important to mind our mindset
I
as we think
think
about our
that,
career?
thank you for first of all, thank you for your support and reading through it. And if it works for teenagers, please tell my stepson he has yet to read it. So, but I'm not taking that personal. But when it comes to this, a lot of it is the mindset when we're coming in. A lot of folks right now are experiencing reorgs that have happened at their organization, whether that's impacted them to have to leave their jobs or just got shuffled into something else. And when I meet with folks, a lot of times, at least what I experienced was the career books that were out there were a little bit of, you take a self-assessment, it tells you to go in this career field and go apply for this. And I find well, that's to go get a job, but it's not necessarily to build a career. And so for me, you spend so much time on the job, and I have found work that I really, really love. And even before that, this idea of how is such a large part of your life. How do you tune into yourself and get intentional about the jobs that you're taking, the jobs that you're applying for? And I do want to make that caveat of I also get, and I have been in those moments where it's like, I don't really have a choice. I need a paycheck type of situation. But even that, how can you be as strategic as possible so that you're really carving this out for yourself? I think the hardship that I see sometimes is that folks believe that they're really at the mercy of who's going to tap them on the shoulder and what's the job availability. And by all means, that external environment, we have to grapple with it. But there's a lot more available to us now more than ever for us to have more hands in the way that this shapes up for us and how it impacts our lives.
Absolutely. You talk about being in the driver's seat of our career,
Yeah.
right? And not expecting others to take charge for our growth. What do you recommend to someone who's still trying to figure it out, trying to figure out they're in their career, but they still don't really know what their purpose is?
Yeah, and I will say to that, you do know what it is. It's somewhere in the back of your head. You've been making decisions around whether you like something, whether something's satisfying to you, whether you feel like the work is worthwhile. So it's there. Um, it just may not be very clear to you. It probably wasn't until my 30s that I looked back and I went, "Oh, that's why I hated that job. Oh, that's why I love that job."
Right.
Um, what I will, what I tend to ask people is like, first and foremost, what are you finding challenging about driving your career? Like, almost even before you get to the purpose is what are the limitations you're putting on yourself of, do you even allow yourself to think you get to, I will say a lot of my coaching, the first part of it is I have to get them to give themselves permission to want what they want. And so a
Mhm.
lot of times they'll say the challenge is getting hired or to get the promotion or to do that. And I'm like, okay, but let's step back and let's get to the source of it. How much are you allowing yourself to believe that you can have what you want, even if it's not present right now?
Right.
Um, and what are those challenges? Underneath it, it's usually a mindset thing. It doesn't erase the other challenges, but how do you get clear on that? And then The first part, I spent a lot of time in the book and on the online program in the what I call the exploratory stage. And I find that people do not like being in this stage, especially as an adult. We're told we're supposed to know where we're going and what we're doing. And to me, I'm like, you actually have to spend some time if you've not tuned into your purpose, what I call dating life. And I was just coaching a gentleman about last week, and he was sitting there worried about, is he going to be on the chopping block? So the first month that I spoke to him, a lot of it was just he's under this weight and this stress. And anyways, this round of reorgs he wasn't a part of, and thank goodness. But he's like, but this made me realize like I need to be thoughtful about this. So I started doing more of this exploratory. And he was like, I just thought about moving to Seattle. I'm never going to move to Seattle, but I went and took a walk and with my brother, and we went around town and looked at it, and I just started to get this energy. And then he was like, I thought about buying a restaurant. I'm probably not going to buy a restaurant, but I'm meeting with somebody on Saturday and we're going to talk about it. I'm just going to see where my brain goes. But the level of energy and optimism and I'm not trying to get woo woo, but like I was like, after I got off the call with him, I'm like, I'm in a better mood. But he just was showing up so differently. And I said, like, look, if you're bringing that kind of energy into your job or into your job interviews, the exploratory stage is about like get tapped into the things
Mhm.
that you like, whether or not your job ends up serving all of that. But it's also like just getting back to yourself and allowing that energy to come back, especially at a time like this where a lot of folks are under stress and under pressure. That bleeds into how you show up. And then people read off of that and go, and I will tell you, two different people showed up in front of me. The individual that I was working with to begin with, he was very smart, very caring, all those things, but just a very different person to engage with. And I'm sure he put on a good face in his meetings or whatever, versus the person that was showing up during the coaching where there was just this, oh my gosh, you are lifting me up. So you got to have something
Right.
to give back. So that's what I like about the exploratory stage. It's low risk. We don't know what we're doing yet. We're just getting our energy levels and our interests kind of exploring what that looks like.
And it's it could be outside of our industry. It could be outside of our work environment.
Yeah, I want to double down on it's basically tapping back into the mentality that we had as kids. For whatever age you got that little wonderment and a belief that you could go wherever snuffed out. Everyone has their own age times that it happened.
Yeah.
But that thing as a kid where there was wonderment and there was joy, even in this, I remember I used to sit, my dad would take us to the park and I would sit for hours looking for like a four-leaf clover. It was ridiculous. And I had the most fun. And those are some of my favorite memories. And it's as ridiculous as that sounds, it's paying attention to where is my longing and my desires kind of pulling me to. Every time I've coached someone, the more that they engage with it in real time, like he's doing, the more stuff comes to the surface and the more clarity that you get. And you can also look, the exploratory stage is also looking at jobs, regardless of location, to your point, regardless of industry, to just kind of go, what's calling to me? What feels appealing? What do I get excited about? But I'll go back to, you have to give yourself permission to even allow yourself to just kind of go, I'm just going to want for a while and allow myself to want what I want. It doesn't mean anything if I don't have it right now.
Yeah. This reminds me of you shared a story when you were very young, your first job interview, real job interview, and it was a critical moment in your life where you were put on the spot by the hiring manager asking you, why should I hire you over those other kids that are waiting to
Yeah,
be interviewed? And it was that aha moment where you thought, okay, what do I bring to the table? What makes me unique? Right. And sometimes we have a hard time doing that, especially when we're chasing perhaps a title,
yeah,
but it's about within whatever area that we are is what's my uniqueness? What is you talk about branding yourself,
yeah.
right?
Yeah, it's such a shout out to Michael Lewis if if this ever comes across his desk at the illustrious place of Foster Freeze. That was my first professional experience, but it was honestly he was a great manager, and we were all like, and at that time I was 14 as my first job, And in that interview, as you're mentioning, all my friends were applying too. And he was like, why should, to your point, why should I hire you over them? And it was like, oh, I can't trash talk them.
Right.
And I remember it so vividly. Like he just leaned forward and was like, ain't the time to be humble. And look, I needed the job enough to go, gotcha. And, I love ice cream and all that stuff. But I, that's carried with me. And once again, this is another permission thing that I think sometimes folks need. I'll talk to people of like, what makes you so unique? And I think they think that means what makes you better than others. And
Mhm. Right.
some, look, some folks are fine going like, I have no problem saying it, but the majority of people that I work with, it's this idea of like, oh, I don't want to sell, I don't want to brag, and it's not that. It is about the way I try to describe it to folks that struggle with it is you have a unique fingerprint. It doesn't make you better than me, but it is
Right.
different than my fingerprint. So can you describe to me that fingerprint so that I understand what it is that makes you tick and how you move and how you show up? And yes,
Absolutely.
like, look, a ton of people do the job that I do, a ton of people do the work that you do. But no one does it quite the way that we do it. And so for you to get that clarity, I think in the exploratory stage, you get to see some of that. And there's also, then it goes to the research stage that starts to exemplify that a little bit, where you start to go, what does it take to do this job? What is it that I bring to this job? And, there's a big thing, coming out of the military. That was the first time I ever learned the phrase transferable skills because no one was hiring for the stuff that I did in the military. But I'm like, I learned a lot while I was in there.
Right.
And so I started to realize, like, oh, my ability to lead, the way that I organize things, the way that I solve problems, the way that I think about problems, the way that I work with others, all that stuff, that's your brand, as you were talking about. Like, the question I'll ask people is if I were to pluck you and put you in any random job, whether that's a restaurant, whether that's a entertainment company, whether that's, selling, fruit at a fruit cart at the beach, like whatever it might be, what am I guaranteed is going to show up about the way that you work? Like that's the thing, that's your brand. That's what would show. I'm always going to talk to people. I'm always going to try to figure out how to expand on whatever it is that we're doing, and I'm going to want to do something creative and fun. Like that's part of my brand, and you can put me anywhere and that's what's going to show up.
So for somebody who struggles, as you
Yeah.
said, I think a lot of people struggle with that, is talking about themselves, finding that uniqueness. What would you recommend to somebody who is at a point where they can't figure that out?
Yeah.
What makes my brand different than others?
One, then I would say, and this is not me, by the way, everybody who's attending this webinar will get a free link to the Kindle book. So I'm not trying to just push books on people. The book is in there. It does have some questions in there to start to self-reflect, but also make sure that you're reaching out to the people that are in your family, your coworkers, or your network and asking them. I'm big on you do the work first. Because I think sometimes we're like, oh, someone tell me what I'm good at. And I'm like, okay, I get it. And I get the humility. But if you haven't done some level of self-reflection and ownership of this is because there's also this process of someone else says it to you, you're really good at talking to people. Oh, shucks, thanks. But if you sit there, there's an almost an emotional process of what am I good at? What do I think I'm good at? And you might have to work, I did, you might have to work through some self-esteem issues and get to the place of like, no, 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 I'm owning that. I am organized AF, like I am getting
Right.
stuff done. No one can touch this. This is what I'm about. This is how I think. Remember another big thing that I try to point out in research is sometimes what helps people is to separate what you deliver from you as a person and to think of it as you are creating a business basically even if you're getting hired by another company you're creating a business so what services and what service experience do you want people to have and if you separate it and you go like Evelyn Gonzalez Inc., or you come up with a fun name. That's one of the exercises I'll do with folks is like if that was your business and you were looking to get hired by a company as a business, list out the services and products you deliver. List out, the top 5 customer service commitments that you have that everyone's going to receive, which is what a business would have to do. Sometimes separating it from ourselves and we go like, "Oh, what is it that want to deliver, within that, you're going to start to feel that brand come out and get more clear on that.
Yes, I also love when you talk about seeing yourself as a consultant
Yeah.
versus just as an employee, right?
Yeah.
Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah. For me, I have issues with authority. And yes, I was in the military. It didn't fix anything. I can blame my mother. It's a whole therapy thing. But I, this idea of my ability to really connect with people from a customer service standpoint was pretty easy from the fast food years, retail years. It was like in my blood. So you show up, you deliver that customer service no matter how they show up. Then I went into the military, which I just was like, oh, I don't do customer service anymore. And then in the corporate environment, and I realized like, oh, I was picking and choosing the people that I was providing consultative service to, basically. And eventually I went out and I was a consultant and I realized like, oh, no matter where people sit in the organization and no matter how they're showing up, people are back to all being my customers again. And the thing that I noticed is around, think about your brand, is that everybody was getting the best version of me because I was in my mind labeling them all as my clients. And then at some point, I went back internally and was working in a corporate office. And I remember telling my manager, who I happened to know from a previous job and got along great. And I just told her, I was like, "You're never going to be my boss. You will be my primary client, but I'm a jackwagon of an employee, but I'm a phenomenal consultant. So even though I'm a full-time employee and whatever, I'm going to view you as my primary client and just know that's how I'm engaging. And you want me that way, trust me." And it was true. Like I just showed up more strategic. It didn't matter what relationship we had. I was a lot easier for me to kind of just go in. And the way I was just describing this in the class this morning, it's thermostat versus thermometer. I'm setting the temperature, I'm bringing my best skills, and it's not reactive to outside, elements. Whereas the thermometer, which trust me, I still struggle with this, but the thermometer is I'm reactive to whoever's showing up. So I'd love to say that I'm always in thermostat mode. That is not the case. Life has often shown me what it takes to pull me back into thermometer mode and be reactive and defensive. But that thermostat mode, I tend to latch into it when I think consultative and the person's my client.
So, can I tell you what my favorite part of your book is?
Please, I'm glad there was one.
It's it's the last couple chapters, the last three chapters. You focus more on veterans and not only veterans who are transitioning from the military into the workforce, civilian workforce, but also for people that work with veterans or may work with veterans. First and foremost, thank you for your service.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you for your bravery and sharing your story. I
Mm,
think it's a reminder to all of us that not all veterans have the same experience, especially being a woman in the military coming out. And your story was very powerful. So thank you for that.
yeah.
What would be your biggest recommendation for a veteran who is transitioning from the military into the civilian workforce? And the same goes for somebody who works with a veteran.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think it's similar to it kind of mirrors what a lot of people are experiencing right now after being, going through a layoff. Is as much as you get out of the military, you're not laid off, but you're out of a job. And, the difference might be that maybe you can see it coming because you signed up for so many years and there was some level of transition that was offered to you, hopefully some good services. I didn't necessarily experience a lot of strong transition services at that time. Um, but as I'm working with people that are leaving organizations and I'm seeing, the mirroring of veterans going into that environment, there's a couple of things I would say. I'm going to just kind of go from this place of the more proactive versus reactive that you can be for anybody that's in this kind of jumping from one job to the next and not having a job lined up. Like you're in this kind of gap between where you were and where you're going. That gap, the more proactive, especially as a vet, how much of this can you do before you leave the military? And some of it you just can't. And but the proactiveness of can you start to not wait for people to kind of come? I think sometimes I see there's this mentality that we have to shift, that someone's going to come and tap us for something, that finding a job or creating a job for ourselves, it's not necessarily the thing that people go to school for, right? It's not the business that I want to be in. And so when I'm hunting for a job, it is work. So you have to be a little proactive. You can't just wait for others to tap you on the shoulder. But on the other hand, you have to be easy on yourself. I really, if there was something that I could do for everybody that's in that kind of, transition, whatever we want to call it, oh man, it's a mind, well, I won't say the curse word, but it can mess with you. It can mess with your ego.
Yeah.
Vets coming out came from a lot of times positions where they felt like they were doing these really important things. They were part of a major community. People who were laid off were part of something and felt important and felt valuable. And now you're in the midst, and a lot of us, myself included, and I'm sure if I went and I meditated and I did a lot of therapy, I'd understand that my job is not me, which is what we should understand about ourselves. But I tell you what, in that gap, it feels like the job was me. And we have to be easy on ourselves. We have to get that this too shall end, and we will be back to work, and we will be complaining about not having enough time for our personal lives. So one, I talk about having a regimen where you have a schedule, and I recommend people do the Monday through Friday, 2 hours, 3 hours max a day, that you are applying to jobs and writing up your cover letters and reaching out to your network and doing all the things it requires to do a job. And then you need to clock out. I've heard people say finding a job is a full-time job. It it is a full-time thought process. I don't buy that anyone's able to clock out. I've very rarely, unless you've really set yourself up financially to not worry about this. But it shouldn't be full-time all day, because you will make yourself sick and
Right.
you won't show up as your best. You'll be so stressed. And when you do get an interview, when you are talking to people about helping you, there's a different kind of vibe on you than when you feel confident, when you feel good. And, so do the 2 to 3 hours, do it religiously and get it, set up as a schedule, and then spend the rest of your time going and doing something, even if it's taking a walk, if you're minding your budget at the time, find ways to talk to friends, do something, do a puzzle, do whatever you find that's enjoyable, that
Mhm.
you're putting something back into your self-worth, your sense of self, so that you have the energy to go the next day, and that what they're getting from you is honestly what you bring, like the confidence, the, hey, this is the thing that I'm going to be able to get to you. And what's hard is, don't compare yourself to other people's timing. The truth is, people ask me, and I see people out there, and look, I'm not discounting any business, and maybe they can guarantee these things, but when they say, like, we're going to get you a job within 3 months, it honestly reminds me of back in the day when I was dating. And yes, I signed up for dating services. And they're like, we're going to get you married in the end of 6 months. And I'm like, look, lady, calm down. Like, just who knows what's going to happen. But if you can get me a couple of dates of people that I wouldn't normally meet, like, that's your job. But you're not going to guarantee what's going to happen in my life. You can't possibly, like, that's not what I'm here for. Well, same thing with the career thing, is everybody's on a different timetable, and never do you feel it more extremely, I don't even know if that's a proper sentence, than you do in these moments, in these transition moments. So be gentle with yourself. And but then module 3, we talk about the action stage. Like, there's a hesitance, and sometimes there's a hesitance. If I'm military coming out, I know I questioned, like, oh, I was doing this cool job, and now I'm asking my friends if they, my first job out of the military after working at the National Security Agency, which, ooh, look at me, I'm working someplace that's an acronym, and security clearance. And my first job coming out of it was working at Sears Credit and Collections, training people on how to get people to pay for washers and dryers that they shouldn't have bought. So it wasn't glamorous, but it is actually what opened the door to my consulting career and my training career. So thank goodness for the job, and met some of my people that are still in my life right now. So you don't know what it is. Our ego has to get checked a little bit. We have to reach out to people, let them know what we're looking for. People love helping people who are in the middle of helping themselves. And so I think the more that you're able to do that and reach out to your support system, I didn't come out with a big support system of people who were working in all these kind of fancy places, but I will say it was my support system that helped me find the next, kernel on the trail. My friend's dad is the one that happened to get me the job, or at least the interview at Sears, and it wasn't. And he was ex-military as well. So yeah.
Yeah, and all of this advice is applicable to anyone,
Yeah.
right? Somebody who may be transitioning in their careers, or perhaps somebody, let's say a mom who's been out of work for years, kids are grown, and
Yeah.
is trying to get back into the workforce.
Yeah, and the support system, I want to emphasize this, especially right now. I'm seeing this is a weird job market, and I just want to emphasize this. And I don't know how else to describe it. It's not necessarily a bad job market. It's not necessarily this great job market. It's a weird job market, and I credit it to a little bit of what AI has done to the application process and the application tracking process. The recruiters are getting inundated with applications like never before because we get to do this a lot faster than we've ever been able to do. We can apply for multiple jobs and all these services, and AI is writing resumes for us. And so the recruiters are being inundated. And, there's this thing of like, oh, how do I break through the system? Look, there's a lot of tips and tricks around that, but also how do you reach out to people and the people that maybe you think like don't have connections and those types of things, reach out to them and just start letting people know this is what I'm up to. This is what I'm looking for. If you know anybody, it could be the person you think has nothing to do with the work that you do, but they know a cousin of a friend of a friend. And we have to be our own advocates on that. I will say, I mentioned proactive before. The more we are investing in our relationships before we need something, our professional relationships, and being there for others and showing up and doing our best work. And, I've had some of the situations where some of the toughest people that I've worked with that weren't always with the best attitude, but because I showed up as a thermostat, we got to a good place. Those people have shown up in my life on several points throughout my career. So the more you kind of value that support system, like deepen that community. And then, the interview part of it's almost like everything culminates and your ability to talk about the work that you're doing. I know we're coming up on time, so I just want to wrap up and say, like, get good at using those interviews, not necessarily to land the job. In my mind, I'm not landing the job. In my mind, this may be the only conversation we have. How do I help you in this conversation?
Absolutely. If anybody, I know we have to wrap up here, has any further questions about your online program or just in general career development, specifically a follow-up to your book,
Yeah.
uh, what's the best way to reach you or get more
Yeah.
info?
Please feel free. We'll be sending for everybody that registered for the course. They'll get a link of the recording, as well as the those of you who've attended will get a link to a free Kindle version of the book. So you'll have my email, as well as if you're listening to this recording and you don't have my email, free feel free. I'm a
You.
professional speaker, by the way. Feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. Just send me a message. It's Heather MacArthur on there, and happy to reach out and help in any way that I can. And I know we wanted to, just as we're closing up on time, I want to make sure I throw this out here. Hopefully today you got some good nuggets. Jerry is going to be doing something around leading through uncertainty. So if that doesn't dovetail off of what we've been talking about, I don't know what will, but you've got the QR code here. We'll also be including this in the email. And, just want to make sure that also the executive advisory that Evelyn and I are a part of, we are there for thought partnership, training, coaching. We've also got a lot of courses that we offer as well.
Yes. If you don't follow us already on social media, we're on Instagram and LinkedIn, and you're welcome to reach out to Heather or I can help as well.
Yeah, and just appreciate everybody's time. And like I said, if there's questions or anything that we can help with, don't hesitate. And I just want to thank you, Evelyn, for because this talk about. I just want to, since I have a minute, talk about community. Evelyn's just somebody who always supports and amplifies, and I just appreciate. Like you said, I wrote this book years ago, and you were like, "We need to dust this thing off. Let's talk about it." So I just appreciate you. Thank you so much.
Of course. No, this is awesome. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Hope you have a
Thank you.
fantastic rest of your day.